I'm Samantha, 34 years old, and for 7 years I felt invisible in my husband's family. At their annual summer barbecue, his sister Katherine raised her glass and announced, "If Sam disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." Everyone erupted in laughter. Everyone except me. I just raised my hot dog, locked eyes with her, and said, "Challenge accepted." That single moment changed everything. Looking back now, I realize it was the smallest push I needed to reclaim my entire life. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and join me for weekly stories about women who took back their power. Thomas and I met at a charity fundraiser 8 years ago. He was charming, attentive, and so different from the men I'd dated before. At 36, he had established himself as a successful investment banker, coming from a long line of wealthy financial advisors. I fell hard and fast for his intelligence, his dry humor, and the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. The first time he introduced me to his family, I wore a dress I'd saved 3 paychecks to afford. I wanted to make a good impression on Eleanor and Richard, his parents who lived in a sprawling colonial home in the most exclusive neighborhood in our city. I remember standing in their foyer, taking in the crystal chandelier, the original artwork, and feeling completely out of place. "So, Samantha, Thomas tells us you work in graphic design?" "That's a creative choice," Eleanor had said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Yes, I've been with my agency for 5 years now," I'd replied, hoping my accomplishments might impress them. I always thought those kinds of jobs were for people who couldn't quite make it through proper university programs, Richard commented casually, swirling his scotch. I'd look to Thomas, expecting him to defend me, my education, my career. He'd simply chuckled and changed the subject. That should have been my first warning sign. But I was in love, and I thought I could win them over. For 7 years, I tried. I studied wine to impress Richard. I learned to play tennis because it was Eleanor's passion. I volunteered for the same charity organizations that Katherine did. I adapted my wardrobe to meet their unstated but obvious expectations. I even took etiquette classes secretly, determined to master the complicated table settings and social norms that seemed second nature to them. My friend Jennifer warned me early on, "Sam, you're dimming your light for these people. They're never going to think you're good enough because they've decided that already. They just need time to see the real me," I'd insisted. Diane had been more blunt during our coffee date last spring. "They're classist snobs, and your husband is too weak to stand up to them. You deserve better than being treated like an accessory." But I defended Thomas. He's caught in the middle. It's complicated with families like his. What I didn't admit then was how Thomas had been gradually changing. The man who once admired my independence now made subtle comments about my quirky style. The partner who had loved my spontaneity now seemed embarrassed when I expressed opinions at family gatherings. He developed a habit of gently squeezing my hand under the tablia signal I'd come to recognize as "please stop talking." Despite all this, every family event became another opportunity in my mind to finally break through. Each holiday, each dinner, each weekend gathering was approached with fresh hope that this would be the time they'd see me as part of the family. The annual summer barbecue at Eleanor and Richard's estate was coming up, and I decided to make my grandmother's famous potato salad recipe. It was a humble dish, but it represented my family, my roots, my identity. "Are you sure about bringing that?" Thomas asked as he watched me prepare it the night before. "Mom always gets everything catered. No one really brings food." "That's exactly why I want to bring something personal," I explained. "I want to share a bit of my family tradition." He shrugged, unconvinced, but didn't argue further. As we drove to his parents' house the next day, I balanced the glass bowl carefully on my lap, still harboring that persistent hope that had survived 7 years of subtle rejection. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this would be the day I'd finally feel like I belonged. "You seem nervous," Thomas noted as we turned into his parents' long driveway. "I just wanted it to go well," I admitted. He patted my knee reassuringly. Just be yourself. Well, the best version. I chose to ignore the qualifier at the end of his statement. The hope I carried was too precious to examine too closely. Eleanor and Richard's estate looked like something from a luxury magazine spread. The sprawling green lawn had been immaculately manicured, with white tents set up to provide shade from the summer sun. A team of caterers bustled around a professional outdoor kitchen setup, while a bartender mixed drinks at a fully stocked bar. String lights had been hung between trees, ready to illuminate the evening once the sun set. I clutched my grandmother's potato salad in one hand and a small gift bag in the other, a hand-picked selection of artisanal olive oils I thought Eleanor might appreciate. "Thomas, you're here." Eleanor air-kissed both his cheeks before turning to me with considerably less enthusiasm. "Hello, Samantha." I extended the gift bag. "Thank you for hosting, Eleanor. I thought you might like these." She peered inside the bag with a practiced smile. "How thoughtful. I'll add them to the pantry." She handed the bag to a passing server without another glance. "And I brought my grandmother's potato salad," I added, holding out the bowl. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, we have a full menu planned by the caterer, but I suppose we can put that somewhere." She motioned vaguely toward a side table already laden with professional-looking dishes. I placed my contribution at the edge, already feeling it was a mistake. "Bro," Andrew, Thomas's older brother, called from across the lawn. Thomas immediately brightened, patting my shoulder distractedly. "I'm going to say hi to the guys. You'll be okay, right? Get yourself a drink." And just like that, he was gone, jogging across the lawn to where Andrew and James, his brothers, stood with their father near the bar. I stood alone, watching as they embraced, immediately falling into animated conversation that included much backslapping and uproarious laughter. The ease of their interaction made my heart ache. Taking a deep breath, I headed to the bar and ordered a glass of white wine, then approached a group of women that included Katherine, Thomas's sister, and a few cousins I'd met at previous gatherings. So then I told the contractor that if he couldn't match the Italian marble exactly, the whole bathroom renovation would be worthless, Katherine was saying as I approached. I stood at the edge of their circle, sipping my wine, waiting for a natural opening to join the conversation. None came. After 5 minutes of being essentially invisible, I cleared my throat. "Katherine, how are the kids enjoying their summer?" I asked. She glanced at me as if just noticing my presence. "They're fine. We were just discussing my home renovation." "Not really your area, I suppose." "Actually, I just finished redesigning our guest room," I offered. "I'd love to hear about what you're doing." "It's quite involved," she said dismissively before turning back to the others. "Anyway, the marble finally arrived yesterday." The conversation flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream. Eventually, I excused myself, though I'm not sure anyone noticed. The pattern continued throughout the afternoon. I tried joining Thomas and his brothers, but their conversation about investment opportunities quickly excluded me. I attempted to help Eleanor with hosting duties, but was politely informed that the staff had everything under control. I even tried chatting with Richard about a book I'd noticed on his shelf last visit, only to have him cut the conversation short when a golfing buddy arrived. As the afternoon wore on, Katherine's behavior became increasingly obvious. When I mentioned a recent project at work, she interrupted with, "Does anyone need a refill?" When I offered to help bring out desserts, she loudly stated, "The professionals have it handled, Samantha. We wouldn't want anything dropped." The worst moment came when Eleanor asked everyone to gather for a family photo. "Thomas, stand by your brothers." "Katherine, bring the children front and center," Eleanor directed. I stood awkwardly to the side, waiting to be included. "Samantha, would you mind taking the picture?" Eleanor asked, holding out her camera. It wasn't the first time I'd been excluded from family photos, but it stung freshly each time. I took the camera with a tight smile and captured the perfect family portrait, one I would never be part of. During a political discussion before dinner, I made the mistake of expressing a view that differed from the family consensus. "Well, that's certainly an interesting perspective," Richard said, in a tone that made everyone chuckle. "What Samantha means," Thomas jumped in, "is that there are different approaches to consider." He proceeded to restate my point in slightly different words, earning thoughtful nods from the same people who had dismissed me moments before. I watched Thomas throughout the day, noticing how he transformed around his family. The man who could be gentle and attentive at home became louder, more opinionated, and notably less concerned with my comfort. He laughed at jokes that would normally offend him, agreed with statements he'd normally question, and seemed altogether like a stranger wearing my husband's face. By the time everyone gathered around the long outdoor dining table for dinner, I was emotionally exhausted. I found myself seated at the far end, next to a second cousin's teenage daughter who was more interested in her phone than conversation. My potato salad sat untouched among the catered spread. The dinner had progressed through multiple courses, with servers bringing out dish after perfectly presented dish. Wine flowed freely, and Katherine, seated near the head of the table beside her parents, had become increasingly loud with each glass. I picked at my food, feeling increasingly disconnected from the lively conversations happening around me. Thomas, seated between his brothers several spots away, hadn't looked in my direction for at least 30 minutes. Katherine stood suddenly, glass in hand, slightly unsteady on her feet. "I want to make a toast," she announced. The table quieted as everyone turned their attention to her. "To family," she began. "The most important thing in the world. The people who truly know you, support you, and would notice if you weren't around." A few chuckles rippled through the gathered relatives. Her gaze fixed on me at the far end of the table. Unlike some additions to the family, if Sam disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. The laughter erupted immediately. Eleanor covered her mouth delicately as she chuckled. Richard let out a booming laugh. Thomas's brothers slapped the table in amusement. And Thomas, me husband, my partner, my supposed protector, threw his head back and laughed heartily along with them. Time seemed to slow as the sound washed over me. 7 years of trying to belong, of dimming myself, of making excuses for their behavior, and Thomas's complicity crystallized in that single moment. I felt a strange calm settle over me as I processed what was happening. This wasn't just a joke. This was the unvarnished truth about my place in this family I had none. The laughter continued as I sat perfectly still, my mind running through every snub, every dismissal, every moment Thomas had failed to stand up for me. I thought about the holidays where my gifts were politely set aside, the conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the way Thomas had gradually stopped bringing me to smaller family gatherings, claiming they were just quick catch-ups not worth my time. As the laughter began to subside, I noticed Thomas finally looking at me, his expression shifting as he registered my stillness. With deliberate slowness, I raised my hot dog, the only item I'd taken from the gourmet spread, a small act of rebellion against the pretension and locked eyes with Katherine. "Challenge accepted," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the sudden silence. Confusion crossed Katherine's face. "What? If I disappeared, no one would notice?" "Challenge accepted." I took a bite of the hot dog, maintaining eye contact. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "Oh, come on, Samantha. It was just a joke," Eleanor said with a nervous laugh. "Katherine didn't mean anything by it," Thomas added quickly. "Lighten up," Richard advised, already turning back to his conversation. And just like that, the moment passed for them. Conversations resumed, dessert was served, and the party continued. But for me, as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Thomas finally approached me. "Ready to go?" he asked, as if nothing had happened. The drive home was silent. I stared out the window, mentally cataloging what I would need to take with me and what I could leave behind. "You're overreacting," Thomas finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "Katherine was drunk." She makes stupid jokes. It wasn't just Katherine, I replied quietly. It was everyone laughing. It was you laughing. It was a joke, Sam. God, you're being so sensitive. This is why it's hard to bring you to family events. You always find something to be upset about. And there it was, confirmation of what I'd suspected. I've spent 7 years trying to be accepted by your family, I said. 7 years watching you become a different person around them. 7 years making myself smaller to fit into their world. That's not fair, he protested as we entered the house. My family has always welcomed you. I laughed then, a sound with no humor in it. No, Thomas. They've tolerated me. There's a difference. You're being dramatic. Let's just go to bed. You'll feel differently in the morning. The argument continued in circles, with Thomas minimizing Katherine's comment and my feelings while I tried to make him understand the cumulative weight of years of similar treatment. I don't want to talk about this anymore tonight, he finally said, frustration evident. I'm going to bed. I watched him climb the stairs, not following. I'll be up in a bit, I said. I waited until his soft snores drifted down the staircase before I began to move. With quiet efficiency, I packed a suitcase with essential clothing, my important documents, and a few irreplaceable mementos. I transferred half our savings to my personal account, money I'd contributed to over years of our marriage. I wrote a brief note and placed it on the kitchen counter alongside my wedding ring. The note was simple: challenge accepted. Don't try to find me. I left our house at 4:30 in the morning, the sky still dark with just a hint of dawn approaching. My practical sedan, the car Thomas had always been slightly embarrassed by, next to his luxury SUV, was packed with the essentials I'd need for my disappearing act. The ATM allowed me to withdraw $2,000 in cash, enough to sustain me until I figured out my next steps. I checked into a motel 50 miles outside the city using cash and my rarely used maiden name. Sitting on the edge of the lumpy bed, I sent a text to my closest friend, Megan, who lived 3 states away in Colorado. Need a place to stay for a while. Marriage over. Explain when I see you. Can I come? Her response came within minutes, despite the early hour. Doors open. Always. Drive safe. The next task was hard. Next, I methodically deactivated my social media accounts. Not just logging out, complete deletion. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all wiped away. I visited a mobile store when it opened and purchased a prepaid phone with a new number, then powered off my old device after transferring essential contacts. As I drove toward Colorado, I made one last connection to my old life. I sent Thomas an email from a newly created account. Thomas, you and your family have made it abundantly clear over 7 years that I am an afterthought in your lives. Katherine's joke was merely the final confirmation of what I've long suspected. I am not, and never will be, truly part of your family. So I'm accepting the challenge. I'm disappearing. Don't look for me. Don't try to contact me. Consider this marriage over. I've taken only what's rightfully mine. Divorce papers will find you eventually. Goodbye. Samantha. The drive to Colorado took 2 days. 2 days of alternating between crying so hard I had to pull over and feeling a surprising sense of liberation that made me roll down the windows and let the wind whip through my hair. By the time I reached Megan's modest home in Denver, I was exhausted but somehow lighter. Megan took one look at me standing on her doorstep and pulled me into a fierce hug. Whatever happened, we'll figure it out together, she promised. That first week at Megan's place was a blur of emotion. I spent hours sobbing into her couch pillows, questioning my decision, wondering if I'd overreacted. But when I showed Megan pictures from the barbecue and explained the years of subtle exclusion leading up to Katherine's joke, her expression hardened. Sam, what you're describing is emotional abuse. Not just from his sister, but from Thomas too. He was supposed to be your partner, your shield against that kind of treatment. On my 6th day in Denver, Megan brought her laptop to the breakfast table. You should see this, she said grimly. Katherine had posted on her still public Instagram, "Some people just can't take a joke. Drama queen takes off after family barbecue. Betting she'll be back begging for forgiveness within a week. Family drama getaverit." The post had dozens of supportive comments, including one from Thomas's mother. "Some people simply aren't cut out for our family. Thomas deserves better." The panic attack hit me without warning. Suddenly I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't see beyond the rage and hurt consuming me. Megan held me through it, her steady presence anchoring me until the storm passed. "They're still not taking me seriously," I whispered when I could speak again. "They think this is just another example of me being too sensitive." "Then they don't deserve to know the real you," Megan said firmly. "What do you want to do now?" The answer came with unexpected clarity. "I need to go somewhere they'd never look. Somewhere I can truly start over." Seattle had always appealed to me, opposite coast from my East Coast life with Thomas, known for its creative community and large enough to disappear into. When I mentioned it to Megan, she made a call to her old college roommate, Lauren, who had an extra bedroom in her apartment. "It's yours for as long as you need," Lauren told me when we spoke. "Any friend of Megan's is a friend of mine." Before leaving Denver, I sent one final email to Thomas from my new anonymous account. I meant what I said. "This isn't a cry for attention or a dramatic gesture to make you chase after me. I'm truly disappearing from your life, just as Katherine suggested no one would notice if I did. Consider this marriage over. I've retained a lawyer who will contact you regarding divorce proceedings. Do not attempt to find me." As I drove northwest toward my new beginning, I felt equal parts terrified and exhilarated. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't trying to fit myself into someone else's expectations. I was free to rediscover who Samantha really was, beneath all the compromises and adaptations. Seattle welcomed me with a week of uncharacteristic sunshine, as if approving my decision to start anew. Lauren's apartment was small but bright, located in a bustling neighborhood filled with coffee shops and bookstores. She worked long hours as a nurse, giving me space to process my emotions privately while offering friendship when we were both home. "Fresh Start Fund," she declared one evening, sliding an envelope across the kitchen table. Inside was information about a local design agency looking for a freelancer. "Lauren, you didn't have to. Megan told me you're talented. They're a client's husband's company. Just go show them your portfolio. No pressure." That small act of kindness from someone who barely knew me brought fresh tears, but these were different from the ones I'd been shedding for weeks. These felt cleansing, hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild after all. Seattle embraced me like an old friend I'd never met. The misty mornings, the vibrant neighborhoods, the constant hum of creativity, everything about the city felt like a salve to my wounded spirit. Lauren had introduced me to the design agency, and after showing them my portfolio, they'd offered me freelance work that quickly evolved into a full-time position with better pay and more creative freedom than my previous job. My small studio apartment, found after 2 months of staying with Lauren, became my sanctuary. I painted the walls a deep teal color Thomas had always vetoed as too intense for our neutral-toned home. I bought mismatched furniture from thrift stores and arranged it exactly how I wanted. For the first time in years, I was creating a space that reflected me, not what someone else thought I should be. "This place is so you," Maria commented during our first movie night. Maria worked at the desk next to mine at the agency and had appointed herself my Seattle orientation guide. "Is that a good thing?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "It's a fantastic thing," she assured me. "It has personality, life, soul." Maria introduced me to her friend circle, a diverse group of creative professionals who accepted me without question. Anthony, a copywriter with a passion for obscure films, often challenged me to design movie posters for his favorite undiscovered classics. Claire, a web developer with a contagious laugh, convinced me to join her weekly pottery class. "You need to get your hands dirty," she insisted. "Literally. It's therapeutic." She wasn't wrong. The feel of clay spinning between my palms became a meditative practice, a way to connect with the present moment when memories of my past life threatened to overwhelm me. 3 months into my Seattle life, I started therapy with Dr. Nelson, a compassionate woman with keen insights. "Tell me about your marriage," she asked during our first session. I thought it was good, I admitted, until I realized it wasn't. Over weekly sessions, Dr. Nelson helped me unpack the subtle ways Thomas had controlled aspects of my life. How he'd praise me for being low maintenance when I didn't express needs. How he'd frame my desire to be accepted by his family as my responsibility, not his. How he'd gradually isolated me from friends who were too negative about our relationship. "You experienced what we call frog in boiling water syndrome," she explained. "If you put a frog in boiling water, it jumps out immediately. But if you put it in comfortable water and slowly increase the temperature, it doesn't perceive the danger until it's too late." "Are you calling me a frog?" I asked with a small smile. "I'm calling you a survivor," she corrected gently. "You jumped out before it was too late." With therapy came self-discovery. I enrolled in a photography workshop, something I'd always wanted to try but Thomas had dismissed as a waste of money. I joined a hiking group and discovered muscles I never knew I had while developing a profound appreciation for the Pacific Northwest landscape. I even tried salsa dancing despite having 2 left feet because nobody in Seattle knew me as reserved Sam who didn't do things like that. 6 months after my disappearance, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, considering my reflection. I'd cut my hair into a stylish bob-and-other change Thomas would have protested, and there was color in my cheeks that had nothing to do with makeup. My eyes looked clearer, more present. I was becoming someone new while paradoxically feeling more authentically myself than I had in years. That evening, scrolling through my new email account, I saw a message that made my heart stutter. "Is this still your email? It's been 6 months. We need to talk. Thomas." My finger hovered over the delete button. For a brief moment, I considered responding. Despite everything, there was a small, wounded part of me that still wondered if he'd finally understood how his actions had hurt me. If his family had recognized what they'd lost. Instead, I closed the laptop and called Claire. "Emergency wine night," I announced when she answered. "My ex found my email. I'll bring the Merlot," she promised without hesitation. That night, surrounded by new friends who accepted me exactly as I was, I made a decision. I wouldn't respond to Thomas. Not yet. I needed a full year, a complete cycle of seasons to discover who I was outside of that relationship before I could risk any contact with my past. To the new Sam, Anthony toasted, raising his glass. "Whoever she turns out to be." To boundaries, Claire added with a knowing smile. To challenges accepted, I finished, clinking my glass against theirs. Dating felt like learning to walk again after a long illness. My first coffee date with a graphic novelist named Justin was awkward but sweet. We didn't have romantic chemistry, but he became a friendly face at creative industry events. A brief relationship with Daniel, an environmental lawyer, fizzled after a month when it became clear we wanted different things. "You're still finding yourself," he said kindly during our gentle breakup conversation. "That's important work. Don't rush it for anyone else's timeline." As my 1-year disappearance anniversary approached, I created a list of goals I'd accomplished. Found a job I loved. Made genuine friendships. Established my own home. Started therapy. Explored new hobbies. Reconnected with my creativity. Learned to be alone without being lonely. The last item had been the most difficult, but ultimately the most rewarding. I discovered that my own company could be delightful when I wasn't constantly seeking external validation or trying to make myself acceptable to others. The divorce papers had been processed through attorneys, with Thomas eventually signing without contest after his initial attempts to locate me failed. I'd kept Lauren's address off all official documents, using a P.O. box instead. The legal severance of our ties was almost complete, and with it, I felt another layer of weight lifting from my shoulders. What will you do if you ever run into him? Dr. Nelson asked during a session. I honestly don't know, I admitted. Part of me thinks I'd just turn and walk the other way. And the other part? I considered this carefully. The other part would want him to see how well I'm doing. How whole I've become without him. Dr. Nelson nodded. Both responses are valid. The important thing is that you're preparing yourself for possibilities without letting fear of them control your present. With her guidance, I'd created contingency plans for various scenarios running into Thomas, being contacted by his family, even the possibility of him showing up in Seattle. Having these plans reduced my anxiety and allowed me to focus on building my new life rather than looking over my shoulder for ghosts from my past. What I couldn't have planned for, however, was running into Sophia, Thomas's cousin, at a graphic design conference in Portland. The Portland Design Summit was a 3-day event I'd been looking forward to for months. My agency had sponsored my attendance, seeing it as professional development and an opportunity to network with potential clients. I'd packed my most confident outfits and practiced my elevator pitch, feeling like a legitimate professional rather than the imposter I'd often felt like in my previous job. I was examining the program between sessions when I heard it. Samantha? Samantha Lewis. My maiden name. Unlike Katherine, Sophia had always been civil, if distant. She'd never gone out of her way to make me feel welcome, but neither had she participated in the more overt exclusionary tactics. We'd exchanged pleasantries at family events, nothing more. It is you, she said, her eyes wide with surprise. Oh my God. For a brief, wild moment, I considered denying my identity or simply walking away. Instead, I took a steadying breath and called upon the strength I'd been building over the past year. Hello, Sophia, I said, my voice remarkably steady. This is unexpected. Unexpected? Sam, you disappeared. The whole family has been. Well, it's been quite a situation. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, taking in my new hairstyle, my professional attire, my overall appearance of well-being. I didn't disappear. A crowd of conference attendees moved between us, heading to the next session. Sophia gestured toward a quiet corner with coffee service. Could we talk? Just for a few minutes. Curiosity won out over caution. I nodded and followed her to a small table partially screened by a decorative plant arrangement. You look good, she offered after we'd settled with our coffees. Really good, actually. Thank you, I replied, not returning the compliment out of social obligation as I once would have. I am good. Thomas has been trying to find you. I'm aware. I didn't want to be found. Sophia fidgeted with her coffee cup. The family. Things changed after you left. This piqued my interest despite my determination to remain detached. Changed how? At first, it was like Katherine said on her Instagram. Everyone thought you were being dramatic, that you'd come back within days. Sophia at least had the grace to look embarrassed. But when weeks went by and Thomas couldn't find you anywhere, it started to sink in that this was serious. I kept my expression neutral, waiting. Thomas fell apart, she continued. I've never seen him like that. He started missing family dinners, which was unheard of. When he did show up, he'd pick fights with Katherine about what she'd said to you. This was not what I'd expected to hear. Thomas confronting his sister? The man who'd spent 7 years carefully avoiding any family conflict? About 3 months after you left, there was a big blow-up at Sunday dinner. Katherine made some comment about you being gone, and Thomas just exploded. He told everyone exactly how they'd treated you over the years, all the little comments, the exclusions, everything. He said he'd been a coward for not standing up for you sooner. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, using its warmth to ground myself. That must have been quite a scene. It was eye-opening, Sophia admitted. I'll be honest, I never realized how bad it was. I mean, I noticed some things, but I didn't think. She trailed off, seemingly uncertain how to continue. You didn't think it was your problem, I finished for her. Yeah, she said quietly. I'm sorry for that. The apology, simple as it was, caught me off guard. In 7 years, I'd never received an apology from anyone in Thomas's family. After Thomas's outburst, people started reflecting on their behavior. Sophia continued. Eleanor actually cried, which I've seen maybe twice in my life. Richard got defensive at first, but even he eventually admitted they'd never given you a fair chance. And Katherine? I couldn't help asking. Katherine had the hardest time admitting fault. But when Thomas started pulling away from the entire family, she finally realized what her joke had cost. She's been in therapy, actually. Sophia gave a small, disbelieving laugh. Never thought I'd see that day. I absorbed this information silently, trying to reconcile it with the family dynamics I'd experienced for so many years. Thomas moved out of your house, Sophia added. He said there were too many memories. He's got an apartment downtown now. Hardly sees the family anymore. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted to destroy Thomas's relationship with his family. Can I tell them I saw you? That you're okay? Sophia asked hesitantly. I considered this carefully. You can tell Thomas you saw me at a professional conference. That I looked well. Nothing more. She nodded, accepting the boundary. He still loves you, you know. Love without respect isn't love, I replied, the words coming from a place of hard-won wisdom. It's possession. We parted ways soon after, exchanging no contact information, making no promises to keep in touch. As I watched Sophia walk away, I felt strangely unburdened rather than upset by the encounter. I'd faced a piece of my past and remained firmly anchored in my present. A week after returning to Seattle, an email appeared in my personal account. Samantha. Sophia told me she saw you at a conference. She said you looked well. I can't express how much of a relief it is to know you're okay. I understand if you never want to speak to me again. I wouldn't blame you. But if you're willing, I'd like to apologize properly in person. No pressure, no expectations. Just a conversation at a time and place of your choosing. Thomas. I read the email multiple times, searching for the subtle manipulation tactics I'd become attuned to recognizing. Finding none, I still let the message sit unanswered for 3 days while I processed my feelings. On the 4th day, after a particularly insightful therapy session with Dr. Nelson, I replied, Thomas, I'm willing to meet once. There's a cafe called Evergreen on Pike Street. I'll be there Saturday at 11 in the morning. If that doesn't work for you, suggest another public place. Samantha. His response came within minutes, a simple confirmation of the time and place, no additional pressure or emotional appeals. As Saturday approached, I found myself surprisingly calm. The woman who would be meeting Thomas was not the same one who had disappeared a year ago. Whatever happened, I would be okay. The Evergreen Cafe buzzed with Saturday morning Energy laptop-focused students, friends catching up over brunch, baristas calling out elaborate coffee orders. I'd arrived 20 minutes early to secure a corner table with a clear view of the entrance, ordering a cappuccino to occupy my hands. At precisely 11 o'clock, Thomas walked through the door. I almost didn't recognize him. The impeccably groomed, confident man I'd married had been replaced by someone with shadows under his eyes, slightly longer hair, and clothes that lacked his usual meticulous attention to style. He spotted me immediately, a flash of what looked like relief crossing his features before he schooled his expression into something more neutral. Thank you for meeting me, he said after ordering a black coffee and settling into the chair across from me. You look different, I observed. A rueful smile touched his lips. So do you. But in your case, it's a good different. I acknowledged this with a small nod. How did you find my email? I didn't. I've been sending messages to your old account every few weeks, hoping you might check it someday. He cradled his coffee cup, not drinking. When Sophia told me she'd seen you, I sent one more. I guess you finally looked. It was time, I said simply. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history and separate years hanging between us. "I owe you an apology," Thomas finally said, his voice low and serious. "Not just for what happened at the barbecue, but for 7 years of failing you as a husband and a partner." I hadn't expected him to dive straight in, and the directness caught me off guard. "After you left, I was angry at first. What changed?" I asked. "I started therapy," he said, surprising me again. "At first just to cope with you being gone, but eventually to understand why I'd been so blind. Why I couldn't stand up to my family. Why I became a different person around them." "And did you figure it out?" "Some of it." He met my eyes directly. "I grew up with conditional love, performance-based acceptance. I learned early that keeping the peace, never rocking the boat, was how to stay in my parents' good graces. I carried that pattern into our marriage, prioritizing my family's approval over your happiness, over our relationship." The insight showed a level of self-awareness I hadn't witnessed in him before. "I'm not telling you this as an excuse," he clarified. "There is no excuse. I'm telling you because I want you to know that I understand now what I did wrong, how I failed you." "Thank you for saying that," I said, genuinely moved by his accountability. "I confronted my family," he continued. "All of them, but especially Katherine. I made them see how they'd treated you, how I'd enabled it. It didn't go well at first." A sad smile crossed his face. 7 generations of entitlement doesn't disappear overnight." "Sophia mentioned there was a blow-up." He nodded. "Several, actually. But eventually, some of them started to get it. My mother actually asked me recently what she could do to make amends, if you were ever willing to hear it." "I'm not sure I am," I admitted. "That's completely fair," he said without hesitation. "You don't owe any of us forgiveness." His acceptance of my boundary so different from how he would have reacted a year ago was refreshing. "Can I ask you something?" he ventured after another silence. "You can ask. Are you happy? In your new life?" I considered this carefully. "I'm whole," I finally said. "I'm myself again, or maybe for the first time. I have work that values me, friends who see me, and a life I've built on my own terms. So yes, I'm happy." He nodded, a complicated mix of emotions crossing his face. "I'm glad. You deserve that. What about you?" I found myself asking. "I'm getting there," he replied. "The therapy helps. Stepping back from my family's influence helps. I'm learning who I am without their expectations. It's harder than I expected." Another silence fell, more comfortable than the previous ones. "Sam," he said eventually, "I know our marriage is over. I'm not here to try to win you back or change your mind about the divorce. But I want you to know that losing you, really losing you, not just you walking away, has been the hardest, most transformative experience of my life. You taught me what real courage looks like." Tears pricked at my eyes unexpectedly. "I didn't leave to teach you anything, Thomas. I left to save myself." "I know," he said gently. "That's what made it so powerful." We talked for nearly 2 hours, catching each other up on the major developments of our separate lives. He told me about changing positions at his firm, seeking work that aligned more with his values rather than his family's expectations. I shared stories about Seattle, my new friends, my rediscovered creativity. As our conversation wound down, he asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Is there any chance, Sam? For us?" I met his gaze steadily. "No, Thomas. That chapter of our lives is closed. We've both changed too much in different directions." He nodded, accepting this without argument. "I thought you might say that." "I respect your decision. I hope you find happiness," I told him, meaning it. "I hope you become the person you want to be, not who your family expects." "I hope so too," he said with a small smile. We parted with an awkward hug, neither fully embracing nor completely pulling away, much like our relationship had been toward the end. 2 weeks later, I received an email from Katherine. I nearly deleted it unread, but curiosity won out. "Samantha, Thomas told me he met with you. I don't expect you to respond to this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry for how I treated you for 7 years, and especially for what I said at the barbecue. It was cruel, thoughtless, and worst of all, it reflected how I'd made you feel for years. I was jealous of your relationship with Thomas, resentful of how you challenged our family status quo just by being yourself, and too entitled to examine my own behavior. I'm working on becoming a better person. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that your departure forced me to face some ugly truths about myself. Katherine. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete the email either. Some wounds were too deep for simple apologies to heal, but I appreciated the effort nonetheless. As the second year of my new life began, I hosted a housewarming party in my newly purchased condo, a small but bright space with large windows overlooking a tree-lined street. My Seattle friends filled the rooms with laughter and conversation. To my surprise, Sophia came, having kept in occasional contact after our conference encounter. More surprising was who she brought with her: Thomas's brother Andrew and his wife Lily, who greeted me with genuine warmth and no mention of the past. We're in town for a medical conference, Andrew explained. Sophia mentioned your party. I hope it's okay we came. It's okay, I said, finding I meant it. Later that evening, as my guests mingled and the Seattle sunset painted my living room in golden light, Maria sidled up beside me. So that's the famous X family, she murmured. They seem normal. They're trying, I replied. We all are. Looking around at the life I'd built, the career I'd advanced, the home I'd created, the friendships I'd nurtured, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman who had raised a hot dog and accepted Katherine's challenge was still part of me, but she wasn't all of me anymore. I'd learned that visibility isn't something others bestow upon you, it's something you claim for yourself. Being seen begins with seeing yourself clearly, valuing your own worth independently of others' assessment. Would I have discovered this truth without Katherine's cruel joke? Perhaps eventually. But sometimes the universe delivers exactly the push we need, exactly when we need it, even if it arrives in painful packaging. So here's my challenge to you. Don't wait for someone to make you disappear before you decide to be truly seen. Value yourself enough to walk away from relationships that diminish you. Build connections with people who celebrate rather than tolerate your presence. Create a life that reflects your authentic self, not someone else's expectations. Have you ever had to disappear from a relationship to find yourself? Drop a comment below and share your story. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about reclaiming your power. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's familiar toward what's right for you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in next week's video.